Welcome everyone to the freestyle match between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen in Singapore. This is game number 2. In the first game, Magnus Carlsen did win and now Caruana is in a must-win situation. The arbiter is giving some explanation to the players because it's a new venue where they are playing. It's inside the high security vault of a place called as Le Freeport in Singapore. This is an amazing venue and the players have been asked to wear the headphones as a compulsory measure here because of some of the sound which is going on behind the scenes here. The commentary room is nearby because the venue itself is so unique that it's very difficult to set it up, and the players shake hands and start the game. Now let's have a look at the position after Caruana's first move, c4. You have the knight in the corner, then the two bishops, rook, knight, king, rook and queen. Magnus responds back with c6, and we have the Slough defense, it seems, in chess 960 here, with Magnus playing d5. Fabi is in a must-win, and I think that's the reason why he goes for c5, and Magnus plays e5. H5. Actually, I was wondering if e5 is possible, and it could have been not such a bad idea, but h5, h4 has been played, and Magnus now brings his knight out to f6. I love this position for black as of now because e5 is definitely a strong move that can happen, which generally in such structures is what black wants to do. So the bishop is well placed on b8. g3 here played by Fabi, and Magnus very calmly puts his pawn on g6 as well. The knight comes out to b3, and the knight goes to g4. Very interesting. He's tempting Magnus to play Fabi to play f3, but Fabi plays knight d3, and now bishop comes to f5. A much stronger move would definitely be e5, but he goes bishop f5, and now the knight is kicked away. The knight comes back to h6, and now white space advantage starts to grow. Bishop g5, pinning the e-pawn for now. You don't want to be playing f6 so easily. So knight c7 played here by by Magnus, and Caruana castles. The knight comes in, attacks the pawn on d4 and also the bishop, and he goes back bishop d2. Fantastic move. You can't take here because of takes, queen takes and h6 hanging. So he first takes on d3, bishop d3, and now knight comes to f5, attacking d4 and g3 along with the bishop. Very interesting. Caruana plays g3. He's okay with knight takes g3, queen h3, and then taking on f5, and this position may be very slightly better for white. Instead, Magnus goes wrong with b6, and now this position can get really dangerous with f4. Fantastic move here by Caruana. You can see Magnus not being so happy with his position. The knight goes back. The king moves to b1, and all of a sudden, all the counterplay for black has been lost here. Knight to g4. And Fabi moves in with his queen at a very good place, stopping knight f2. It's a very serious edge for white here. Now, he plays rook to c1. Maybe better was to play cb, ab and rook c1, because now Magnus has a small trick with pawn takes pawn, and he takes with the knight, and you will see that Magnus is so alert. He takes on c5, rook c5, and here is what you need to find, e5. Beautiful move here by Magnus. You can't take with the f pawn, the queen is hanging, so you take with the d pawn, and now knight takes on. Oh, he takes with the bishop, because if knight takes, there's queen e2. With bishop e5, what he essentially wants to do is attack this pawn on b2, and the rook could have come back to c2, but he attacks the c6 pawn now. Magnus chops off b2, rook takes c6. If the queen moves, this is already a lost position because of check, and it's game over. So he goes knight e5, forking here on f3 and c6. You can't be taking this knight. He takes the queen, knight takes f3 happens, and now Fabi takes the bishop, Well, here rook c7, and it seems like the game is over, but there is short castle. This is chess 960. Wow. On 25th move, short castle happens, and f5. Instead of this, rook a6 would have put more pressure on Magnus, but f5, knight e4 takes, pawn takes, and he takes on g6. You're still a pawn up as white, but Magnus is going to give a check now. The engine thinks the position is equal. Let's see how easy it is to hold this. King comes to c1, attacking the rook, and the rook comes back to d3. Now Fabi takes on f7, his second pawn up, but this pawn is not going anywhere. The e3 pawn is falling. He goes rook to f4, his rook was attacked, and now rook takes pawn, and g4, good move there by Fabi here. He's trying his best to put pressure on Magnus. Magnus takes, rook takes, and now the question is whether you should go to the h file or to the f file. If king h7, there are threats of rook c5, rook h5 mate, so he rightly goes king f6, and now Caruana has an idea of check. So putting a lot of pressure there, rook f3, the only move to hold here. If check, I'll go king e5, attacking the pawn on f7. So he goes rook takes pawn, takes the pawn here, and we are going to head into a rook endgame where Fabi is going to be 2 pawns up, rook a4, because a7 cannot be protected. Rook c3 check. Magnus may be going on the defensive, so not giving up the second pawn. He can hold on to it with rook c7. But he has to remain very careful, because now you see the king is cut off. The white king is slowly coming in and could become very, very dangerous here. So Magnus, although the bar says it's equal, Magnus is on the brink of defeat, and he needs to show his amazing endgame skills if he wants to hold this together. Like the hand of death, slowly and steadily, Fabi is moving ahead. a4, and rook f7 played. Well, the Vancouver position says that the h pawn is irrelevant. You can give up your a pawn in such positions, but all that you need to do is from the side keep an eye on your opponent's pawn, which Fabi is not allowing, and this is a mistake. This is a huge mistake here by Magnus, because here he doesn't get the g6 square after a5 a6, but Fabi makes an error. He goes king d5, and Magnus is back. It's a very, very subtle thing. Rook e6 played, and now very important for Magnus to push his pawn to a5. It's not at all easy to find this move. He goes rook f4, but now he is lost here. a5 played, and the reason is very simple. He is not able to hang in on the 5th rank. He gives a check. Fabi blocks. Rook comes back to e6, f6, and now an important move. Rook g5, cutting the king and slowly bringing your king in here is the way, but he goes rook e7 check. Now, whatever may happen here, he should not have taken this pawn. This is a big mistake, because here the Fabi has lost the coordination, and Magnus gets what he always wanted, an eye on the opponent's pawn. This is what Vancouver had said. The h pawn is irrelevant in such positions. I'm looking at your pawn. The moment you push it now, I must continue looking at it with rook f6. Yes. And now it is something that Magnus understands deeply, which is why Caruana should not have rushed to win that pawn. It's a very, very interesting endgame, not trivial by any means, but now the position we have on the board is trivial, because Magnus knows this. He keeps an eye on the a pawn, and there's nothing that Fabi can do. He can maybe try and get rook a8 and a7, but then the rook will swing behind the pawn, and that is also a draw. So king e5, Magnus goes rook c6, a good move there. King f5, and he's just waiting on the third rank. That is the strategy here. You don't have to do anything special, just wait along the third rank. Rook b6, and when the king comes close to the pawn like this on b5, you start checking from the sides. You start checking from f file. For now, Fabi remains on the king side. King g5, rook c6, king f5. He puts his rook on d6. It's a pity that this game is going to end in a draw, because if Caruana had won it, we would have seen an Armageddon. Actually, first the tie breaks, 10+10, and then an Armageddon check if it was 1-1. King comes up, and now if Caruana pushes his a pawn, then rook a6 is fine. He goes king d5, but the rook goes back. Now, just to illustrate here, if you are careless as Magnus and give this check, it's still fine, because you will continue giving checks here. But the ideal thing is, yeah, he gives a check. King here, and be careful, check. Because the king is now entering along the 7th rank, he can go to e7. And it seems like white has made some progress, but not really, because after rook b6, nothing really changed. Yes, rook c6, and as you know, even if you go a7, rook a6, and then you try to bring the king over, there will be checks from the bottom of the board. So rook a7, king h8, very calmly done by Magnus here. Good job. King f7, and now rook b6. Well, he's played king e8, but that doesn't change much. Rook goes to d6, and now Magnus so confident, he's taken out his bottle and also drinking water. Ooh, but the threat here, check, and you lose the rook. So king h7 calmly played here. King e7, and rook c6 played. Goes king e8, again blocking the king's path. King e7, and now Fabi says it's time to make the final progress, because Magnus is just not giving me the 6th rank. He knows how to hold this. And h6. Well, you can even take the pawn, but just that, yeah, he takes it. I was a bit worried if king c7, because now you don't have any side checks. Oops. So here rook takes, rook a7, king g8, king here. He waits, and rook f6 is such a nice move. You can learn a lot from Magnus's technique here, because he wants to give side checks, and he wants that to be completely free. King g7, rook f8 played, and this is a draw for rook takes f8, a7, check, and he takes the pawn, Caruana holds here, draws. Magnus holds the game, and the result is 1.5 in the favor of Magnus. He wins this match, but what a great fight from Fabiano.